Gloria.
You never know where they're going to pop up. All for 10.5 feet of me.
Okay, that woman was a judge, and she has judged her past, her family's past, a horrible event that happened in the history of the migration of her family, and she'll tell you all about it. Gloria, I'd like you to reflect on the actual article that you presented, and then on the impact and the promotion of the book that we did, even to the promotion in Italy. That was so touching.
It was an amazing experience. Dominic, do you tell me, do you want me to share from the story, the get-go of my family's experiences? And I do have an amazing epilogue to this story, which just happened last November. My mother passed away in 1993, and on her deathbed, she had a very special wish. And we find what happened to her little brother, Alfio. And Alfio and my grandmother, Santa Papalardo Maninici, and my mother, Grace Maninici. My mother was 7. My grandmother was about 40. She was widowed. And they were from Tricastagni, Sicily, a beautiful little town in the province of Catania. And my mother's older sister by 14 years, Carmela, she had already immigrated to the United States when she was 21. So she sent back for her widowed mother, my mother who was 7, and little Alfio, who was 4. They came across on the USS Sophia, landed in New York, at Ellis Island, in the end of January of 1921. And very sadly, my little uncle contracted what they thought was scarlet fever in steerage. And when they got to Ellis Island, after about a week, because they detained my mother and my grandmother, because my grandmother was a widow with children, and they didn't think that she had raised a high enough bond. So my aunt, my mother's older sister, was already in the States. I had to get some cousins and pool some money in order to get them out of Ellis Island, which took about 3 months. But the first 10 days of that stay in Ellis Island, my little uncle died of scarlet fever. And because of the language barrier, they never told my grandmother what he died of or what they did with his body. So on my mother's deathbed wish in 1993, it was, please find my little brother. All these years he's been somewhere and we don't know where. So we started, the discovery of what happened to him. It took a couple of years. This was 1993, and we didn't have, Ancestry.com and all of these internet, ancestry discovery options, 23andMe. That wasn't in existence then. But through phone calls, we found out that he was buried in this beautiful little cemetery in Kew Gardens, New York, called the Maple Grove Cemetery. To make a little fast forward, my husband and I went there in 2000 because he said, well, it's going to be your birthday. We won't get into what age it was at that time, but he said, what do you want for your birthday? I said, I want to go to New York, stay where I want to stay, rent a car, and go see where my uncle is buried. Sadly enough, he was buried in a pauper's grave because this is where immigrants coming through Ellis Island, and a lot of those people who died of the Spanish flu in 1918 were buried in mass graves, as was my uncle. Lot 15, Section 8. And it was the caretaker there who told us that he was probably buried in a small pine coffin or burlap bag piled on top of each other in threes. So I was, when I was on the bench, I went back to school, and I was going to school at Northwestern to get a degree in theater. And one of my classes was a playwriting class. And I decided that I would write a play about everything my mother had told me about this that I could remember. And I tried to be as accurate as I could be. So I kept on calling the cemetery. Well, what was that woman's name who checked us in? What was her name? And they actually took out the ledger from 1921 that showed the entry: Alfio Maninici, age 4, country of origin, Sicily, date of death, cause of death. It was all in there from this ledger, which was like 3 feet by 3 feet, all handwritten in that beautiful cursive. No internet then, obviously. So anyway, I wrote this play, and they were wondering, who's this judge that keeps on calling back and asking us these things? Who is buried there? So when the cemetery did their own investigation, they realized, my gosh, there are children here from, not just immigrants, but there are certain people here that we should really pay respect to, because it was in a corner of the cemetery, riddled with weeds, unkept. It was terrible. And I did ask them if I could get a little marker for my uncle. And believe it or not, they're like, gee, if we let you get a marker, we'd have to let everybody, all the families who have people buried here, get a marker. And I said, well, tell me, in 80 years, how many people have asked you if they could get a marker? So they couldn't contest that little issue. They said, all right, you can get a nameplate, which I did. But what has happened since then is when I wrote this play, and I had the most wonderful experience. And really, it was because of Dominic Candelaro and Maya Carboni, when they were doing the book tour throughout Italy of Italian Women in Chicago. Dominic called me and he said, Gloria, the one story that people seem to connect with is your story, because it is the journey of the immigrants. And would you come and think about coming to Rome and doing it when we're in Rome? Well, I think I talked to Dominic on a Wednesday, and within 3 days I'd made arrangements. Fortunately, at an economical price that I could afford, which I would have done anyway. But I flew out to Rome, met them, and it was a wonderful, amazing, once in a lifetime experience to perform this for the Italian Senate in Rome with Dominic and Mayo Carboni. And Dominic, who else was with us from Chicago? There were a number.
Maria was there, Maria DiMarco.
Yes.
And who else? Let's see, of course, I think Rosaria.
Yes, I was there.
Okay, and you remember anybody else, Rose?
Performance.
Yeah.
Rosaria, hello. Is Rosaria also on Zoom?
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
I am, Gloria.
Rosaria.
How are you? You look wonderful.
Piccolo Mondo, see?
Piccolo, piccolo. It was a wonderful performance in Rome at the Senate.
It was amazing. And then, I went back and performed it again for the Sister of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, which was for Mother Cabrini. And that was through Mayo and Gina Carbone. And that was a number of years back. So it was twice that I performed it in Rome. I performed it at a number of storefronts in Chicago for my high school and Mother Macaulay. But here's what I want to share with you, which was amazing. I got to be very friendly with the people at the cemetery. And Carl Bolinas, I know, it was Carl Bolinas who was the administrator, and Helen Day. And they thought that this story was so remarkable that they had me come and perform it at the cemetery. They have a beautiful, beautiful administrative building where they have all kinds of events. And after I performed the play, we walked to the burial site and we did erect another beautiful monument to my uncle and to all the children of immigrants, because their dream, even though it wasn't realized, they carved the way for the children of immigrants and the grandchildren to have their dreams come true. They were the pioneers, and it's all in our DNA because we all have stories to tell. And I remember when I performed it at the cemetery afterwards, and there were about over 100 people there. They would all of a sudden you identify with your own story to share with others, because we all have stories. to tell. And that's why doing this is so remarkably wonderful, that you continue and you energize and you keep alive the lifeblood of who we are and our DNA, because I think that's especially important with the younger generation, where it may become to a degree diluted. I hate to use that word, but because of the generations, does it become less important? It's less familiar, which is keeping these stories alive, brings them in to know who they really are and what their stories are. But what I want to share with you, it was last November, Carl Bolinas, who is now one of the administrators at the Maple Grove Cemetery, and Helen Day, they got tickets for us to go and see the contagious disease ward at Ellis Island, which had just opened. Now, it opened briefly and then the pandemic hit, and we had tickets to go before the pandemic hit. But last November we went, and we actually saw the room where my uncle died, and we saw the little, it was remarkable. It was this little brick building, which was the morgue. And I asked questions. I said, so is this where my grandmother had to go and identify the body? And they said, yes. Now, what was also interesting is when we were on this tour, I had a picture of my uncle, Uncle Alfio. And they stopped and they were like, would you please share with us your uncle's story? And so we did. And so we were like 3 people with a tour of about 12 were in our group. And the tour guides were so anxious to integrate Alfio's story into their script when they do tours. And we, there's always a legal end to this stuff, right? Because it's copywritten material. And we ran into a few little roadblocks with the higher ups at Ellis Island. So unfortunately, it's kind of at a stalemate right now. But they were so interested in this story of Uncle Alfio, where he died in the 3 months. And it took how many years? 80 years later, we found out where he was buried. And like I said, the cemetery every year has a very special Spirits Alive, a remembrance of those who are of notoriety who are buried at the cemetery, including 11 9/11 victims. And Alfio is also a part now of that presentation. But it's not just Alfio's story. It's what Alfio's story represents for all of our stories of how the Italian and Sicilian immigrants came to this world for a better life. And how, even though maybe some of those didn't experience it firsthand, they opened up the opportunities for other immigrants and children of immigrants to have that experience, which they didn't. So that's my presentation. If there's any questions or anyone has anything like that to share or add.
Anyone? Question? Okay. Now, Gloria, what are you doing now?
Well, let's see. I'm a retired judge. However, I am a licensed attorney, and I was teaching law school for the last 3 years at Chicago Kent Law School, where my dad graduated from in 1931, and here 90 years later, his daughter is an adjunct professor there. But when I went back to school at Northwestern, it took me 10 years, but I did graduate with a degree in radio, TV, film. So I am doing quite a bit of acting. I've had 3 auditions this past week. And I am really a local hire out of Los Angeles. I go back and forth from Chicago to LA. About 1.5 years ago, I was on a terrific Amazon Prime production called Utopia. And I was with, my scenes were with John Cusack and Rayan Wilson. And I have to tell you, my mother, Graziella Maninici Papalardo Coco, She said something to me, oops, sorry, years ago, which I'm so sorry. Years ago, which I've shared with others, and it's had an effect on a lot of people. And here's the story. My mother, who loved education, and I was teaching school, Chicago Board of Ed, going to law school at night. And one day I went to school and I was like 5 minutes late. The 8:30 bell rang and I got in there at like, what, 8:33, whatever. And the principal pulls me into her office. And she said, look, I know you're going to law school, but you got to get here on time. I understand. And she said, anyway, you didn't go to law school right out of college. Aren't you a little older than most people? I said, well, I'm an evening student. So by the time you graduate, what, you're going to be 28? I don't know, I said, well, so I don't know. I thought maybe it's not such a good idea. So that every weekend I go home and my mother would do my wash. And even though you use the same washing machine, it doesn't matter. When your mom did your wash, it just ended up being fluffier and cleaner and nicer. I don't know. Anyway, so my mother's doing the washing and I was sitting there for a cup of coffee and I told her the story about I was late and the 8:30 bell rang and I was 8:33 and I blah, blah, blah. And I said, Mom, maybe it's not a good idea. Miss Ryan said, I'm going to be 28 when I graduate. And my mother looked at me and said, Gloria, you're going to be 28 anyway. Why not be 28 and a lawyer? And then I thought, oh, I'm going to be 40 anyway. Why not be 40 and a judge? I'm going to be 54 anyway. Why not be 54 and have the degree in theater that I always want to get? And here I am. I don't know if you could, well, I'm like I'll tell you, in my 70s. And I'm back in Los Angeles with an agent. Had 3 auditions this week, one for Sony, one for Netflix, one for TJ Maxx. And so what it is here you have a Sicilian immigrant, my mother, Gloria Coco, whose wise words, how many years ago? When I was 25 when she said that to me, has really guided me through my entire life, which says age is irrelevant. What's in your heart? We have the spirit and the DNA of people who went over great hardships to attain what they could for a better life. So whatever that better life is for you, it's what's in your heart and it will go on and last regardless of your age. So just do it.
Gloria, you passed our screen test audition. You get the role. A question from Paula.
What would it take to reprise that performance, to bring it maybe to Loyola University, the play based on your story?
It's 25 minutes. It's a one-woman show. I need about 4 props and it can be done.
Okay. I remember, wasn't it Roxanne Pilat who also helped with, you collaborated with her on another project, didn't you?
Oh, with the Italian American Theater Company?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
I did it. Yes. Yes. Yes, there were a couple productions, but I did not do this particular one-woman show with her, but it was other productions that she did. Yes.
Okay, well, can I be in touch then about maybe arranging that?
Oh, it'd be wonderful and I would be honored to do so.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
Well, thank you, Gloria, and thank you for patching things up and coming on so quickly and so well.
Well, Dominic, I want to thank you and Gloria Nardini and everybody who did all this to make this possible and for us to be able to share our stories to reach others, because it's all about sharing your story so the next generation has more stories to tell. Thank you.
Okay. Save our stories. That's our key motto here at Casa Italia Library. And we have participated in the Savior Stories with the publication of those books up there and a significant additional number of books that were autobiographies, etc. So we are actively doing that. And Gloria said that, well, let's say this, I'll say this to you. You're going to be 2 years older than you are now anyway. Now, wouldn't you like to be 2 years older and the author of a contribution to volume 2 of the Italian Women in Chicago? Now, wouldn't you like that? Okay, yeah. So it is a good feeling to know that you have put down onto paper. Well, you know, they say the age of books is gone, but a book is a book is a book. It's always there. And the other stuff, even if you can find it electronically, it's not there like a book is. So we're old-fashioned here, as historians tend to be. And so we urge you to get on board with our project to help in various ways. It could be a photo collection. It could be, maybe this could be even a separate publication. Maybe you find a woman who took hundreds of thousands of photographs that get uncovered when someone is cleaning out a house after there's a death in the family. Maybe you have someone who kept a scrapbook of a particular kind that related to Italian American women, and you'd like to present and analyze the contents of that. It could be any, maybe it's a series of Super 8 films that were made at a particular time in the Italian American family. Yes, Gloria.
Dom, I started writing in 1952 when I was 10. We went to Italy for 6 months. I don't think you could fly, or if you could, we didn't have the money to fly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I started writing about that, about going to Italy, landing in maybe Genoa, and then traveling around. And the only place that understood us was Tuscany and Rome, because we spoke Toscano, and everywhere else it was dialetto.
Yeah, so journaling and all that sort of thing could possibly be the material. CJ talked of starting a Facebook page, My Italian Mother Was, and then letting people post and then collecting those posts and creating an article that would be possible. So there are an awful lot of ways to do this. Surveying your own family, asking them for stories of interesting women in the family, the stories that they remember, because don't let those stories die with the people who are aging. Okay, well,